The theme for this session here is quite interesting. Navigating academic hierarchies. Simply put, the way I see it, is a question come to mind. How successful have you been at the university or in the Ag Center moving from one academic rank to another? Being moving from assistant research associate to associate. How successful have you been? What contributions are you making? What contributions can you make? The question, the lead question on your program, it says, are you reaching your career goals? And as I was driving in from to work this morning, I reflect on my own career. Now I had 35 plus years, and I think it's been relatively successful. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give it a 7 or 8. I had my knocks and bumps, but I made it to this point. I got 1 foot at the university and 1 foot on the outside, if you know what I mean. So it won't be long. Now to the young people, reflecting on the theme of what's going to be presented here. When I was riding in, I thought about 3 important things I think you as professionals, in particular the young people, need to reflect on. When you come into a university and you sit down, the first thing you should do is learn and understand the rules, policies and procedures. They change like the wind in a lot of instances, but you have to be on top of it. That will help you. And the question will come out of there: how can I develop a career to fit into what I understand? The other thing you need to understand, success in higher education, you can't do it alone. I would suggest that you align yourself with mentors. Mentors, people that are professors that have had some successes. I went to Tuskegee several years ago, and I followed that scheme. I knew a lot of people already there. I aligned myself, knowing my role would have been was teaching, research, and service. Some of you know Benny Mayberry. Benny Mayberry, research administration, I aligned myself with him. Grady Taylor, teaching methodology, identified myself with him. Philip Brown, some of you probably know him. I aligned myself with him in extension work. And there are some others that helped me along, and it all worked out. And here I am at Southern University with my leg outside the gate. And the other thing, and the last one, is professional development. You must constantly be involved in professional development activities. You will not always find strong professional development policy and monies for that. But if you align yourself with your association, the association each year have and sponsor professional development activities, and you must participate. There's a research conference every year. Ag research, Dr. Brown, we know we have our biannual research conference. So that's professional development too. So that is important. So with those notes, let's move on to the activity of the day. We have a panel that will provide some food for thought to you along that line. To my right, we have, first we have our, let me look at these names first of all.
Can you see them?
We have Ella Keller is our interim associate vice chancellor for academic affairs and dean of the honors college here at Southern University. She will present to you, and I assume that she will follow the promotion scheme of what you need to do in working through your career. To her right, we have Roland Mitchell, Associate Professor, Department of Educational Theory, Policy, and Practice, LSU. To my left, Linda Benedict. You know, Linda Benedict worked here at the university for a while, and we've had our challenges too. Linda Benedict is the Associate Director, LSU Ag Center Communications. That's Dr. Bridget counterpart. And lastly, we have Dr. Adele Brown, Executive Vice Chancellor and Vice Chancellor for Research here in the Ag Center, and he's my boss. Now, I think the reason that you are here and hearing this, we have had a lot of discussion about this topic. So this is the first debate on this topic, and we are in the midst now of trying to develop some kind of procedure or accountability system that will lead or will help you and guide you in staying on course and reaching your career goals. So he's going forward with a little of that. He probably gonna say something about it, but whatever he say, it doesn't matter. Same thing. You've seen the commercial. What does a gorilla do when he walk in your living room? Sit in the way he want to. So I'll start off with Dr. Kelly. You have about 20 minutes apiece, and then we'll have questions as we go along.
Okay. Do I have to come up here?
Not necessarily.
Okay, well, is it okay if we just talk?
Mr. Dexter, you're in charge as Chris talks to you. Does she need to sit or stand?
Either, if you prefer, you can sit.
Okay. I think everybody can hear me. Good afternoon. I think Dr. Rawls actually, I'm sorry.
So we'll have to get you to stand.
Okay, everybody wants to see me? Okay, so I get to the microphone, how is that? Okay, and that'll also ensure that I don't stand up here too long, since I'm getting to the point that I don't like to stand too long. But good afternoon to everybody. I'm very glad I was able to participate in this activity, and I do appreciate the invitation, although I must admit that when it came, I had some reservations. My thought was, well, what do I have that I can impart to junior faculty and junior associates that might help them? But then I said, well, perhaps my life as a cautionary tale, or maybe even whatever successes I've had, might be of value to some of you. So I decided I'd go ahead with it. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I didn't prepare any notes or PowerPoint as I did on Monday if you were at convocation, because I wanted to approach this more as a discussion, a conversation. But there are some things I think you do need to know, and I remember having spoken with at least one of you, and I think two of you, about this individually, particularly those of you who are on the academic track. Number one, on any track, have some idea of where you want to go. I was meeting with one of our junior faculty members earlier this week who told me that her 10, 15-year plan is to become dean of a college. She's in the humanities, so she would like to ultimately become dean. Is that where you want to go? Or is it just that you want to make sure you can reach professorship, full whatever the title may go with it. I would say definitely lay out your plan, know where you want to go, but also make sure you understand the ground rules. For those of you who are in academic positions, how many of you have actually looked at the tenure and promotion application? Okay, now everybody's hand didn't go up, so that's clearly one thing everybody needs to know. Make sure you have a copy of that tenure and promotion application, and go ahead and fill it out. If you have an electronic copy of it, or even if you don't, put it in an electronic format. Know what has to go in those particular blanks, that you need to put in those blanks so that when you add the points on the end, you'll know that you've achieved that particular goal. And it's not that simple, but if nothing else, that will keep you on track with where you plan to go and how you plan to get there. Dr. Rawls alluded to quite a few of the things, and I'm sure you'll hear the same thing whether you're in the academic track or whether you're in a research track. You have to make alliances. You have to work with other people. And of course, that involves the whole notion of mentoring, reaching out to others, getting assistance where possible. I'm assuming everyone is involved in his or her own individual discipline programs. I'm sure there are certain ag organizations, scientific organizations in which you are a member. Those are always important. At Southern University, we clearly have that three-part mission: teaching, research, and service. All of those count toward your overall goal. You have to build up your teaching credentials. I do recall when we first started using Blackboard, that was a challenge. Getting all your classes in, recording all that information. At some point, all that became part of my packet because I had to go in and demonstrate that I had done all this. And even now, you still have to use Blackboard. And of course, now we have to use live text. So all this is part of what you as a faculty member or as a researcher would have to do. And of course, what I'm saying is make sure you keep records of these things as well. And when we talk about professional development, everyone assumes that we're talking about going to meetings, going to conferences. And given the reality of 2013 and financial constraints, you may not have $2,500 to go to a discipline-specific conference. But there are webinars that are free, and we have to take advantage of the technology that's available to us and use that effectively. Quite frankly, today, if I need to find some information, if you were asked a question that you didn't know, how are you going to get the info? What's your name? Charisma. Quite a good name. Okay, Miss Charisma, if you're confronted with a question and you need to get some information, how are you going to get it? Okay, so my answer would be the same as hers. You Google it. That has become a new expression in our society. There's so much information available to us, and quite frankly, in some cases, there's just too much. But the point is, we have at our hand access to quite a bit of information. We just need to know how to use it, how to manage it. There are some things in addition to the professional. I always tell people to stay at the point where you're mobile, particularly the young folks. For some of us who've been at Southern 20, 30 years, we may not look at mobility. We may be like Dr. Rawls with that one foot someplace else. Now, I noticed he didn't say where that other foot was, and I kind of hope, some of us are talking about 1 foot in other places, but you want to have mobility. You want to always keep yourself at the point where your skills are where they need to be, where your resume can be pulled out at a moment's notice to be sent to wherever it needs to go. Don't think just locally at Southern or wherever you are. Always prepare yourself for that next opportunity, because it may not necessarily be at Southern. It may not necessarily be in Baton Rouge. But even as I say that, I recognize that all of us can't just up and move from Baton Rouge to another city or another state, irrespective of how inviting those opportunities are. So again, that's something you have to weigh. Now, as I look at the young women in the audience, and I'm thinking about families, and children, and how do you balance all that? I don't know if that's been a discussion that you all have talked about, and I can only reflect back to when I had young children. All my children are grown now. My oldest is 31, my youngest is 27. So as Dr. Rawls was asking me, basically, when am I putting my foot out the door at Southern? Quite frankly, my answer is I'm actually renewed in the sense that I no longer have those obligations of the children. So I can devote more time now to Southern than I would have been able to 15 or 20 years ago. So routinely, I'm in my office till 7 o'clock every night. But that may not be a reality for most of you, because there are other obligations that take precedence over the job. But you have to always make sure you devote the time to developing not just your academic credentials, but you have to also take time to recognize the need to make sure you have your family obligations together as well. With respect to the personal end of things, I would encourage you to be true to yourself, but always do whatever you do with integrity, with honesty. Your reputation is the one thing that will be here when you're definitely gone. You want to make sure that people always recognize you as a person of integrity, a person of value, and a person of merit. Be very careful with whom you discuss your personal affairs. I would suggest you keep your business to yourself, because once you've told it to one person, you've essentially told it to everybody. And a lot of times we can be derailed by our best friends. It doesn't have to be our enemies, okay? Those are just some things I thought about that I wanted to bring up to you today. I don't know how you want to handle it, if you want to have questions at this point, or if you wanted to wait until the end. But I would be willing to entertain specific questions as you have them.
Let's go through all the presentations, and then we'll come back and have an open discussion.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So that's essentially the items I wanted to present to you today. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Brown for giving me the opportunity to come have this conversation with you, because this is something that I'm passionate about. I spend way too much time thinking about the ways that universities work because I study universities. And also, I guess this is the second time I've had an opportunity to be a part, actually be in a session, I think the J.K. Haynes Teacher Education Conference. Had a chance to speak with a group of students, colleagues, friends, and faculty from Southern, so it's good to be back. In addition to that, also, I did my undergraduate degree at Fisk University. I'm originally from Nashville. And when I first moved to Baton Rouge, then Baton Rouge seemed like an unfamiliar place. Working at LSU, I mean, Fisk probably has about 600 students. So to go from 600 students to 30,000 students, there's a difference. And then ultimately, just the composition of LSU is significantly different than the composition of Fisk in a lot of different ways. So as I was going through the tenure process, then I spent a significant amount of time in the library at Southern, because Southern seemed a lot more familiar. One of the things that I want to impress upon you as you think about what tenure looks like and actually what it looks like to become part of a research community, you got to find a space that you feel comfortable in doing that type of work. So where do you write? Where do you find the time to be a part of it? But either way, beyond that, what I'd like to do is I want to give you a brief introduction of who I am as it relates to the research that I do, and I think I'll be able to pass on hopefully some information or some conversation starters. Roland Mitchell, I'm currently the Assistant Director for the School of Education, the School of Human Sciences and Education. Part of that is we formerly were a college of education, but we've gone through a significant merger now. As a person who was an assistant professor when that merger happened, if we went from just a college of education to include social work, library information sciences, human resource education and development, then all of a sudden I'm concerned about, so who will be reviewing my tenure package? Are there education folks? Are there social works folks? So that's part of the process as I'm putting my package together. How do I relate to my new colleagues? As I said, I did my undergraduate degree in history at Fisk University. I did a minor in religion. I did my master's degree at Vanderbilt University, a master's in in higher education, and a PhD in educational research at the University of Alabama. 3 totally different institutional types. And the one thing that I learned, small private liberal arts, historically black college Fisk, moderate sized research intensive private university of Vanderbilt, I was under the impression that because I was studying with people from Duke and Harvard, that there was going to be some kind of new insight or brilliance that existed at those kind of places that didn't exist in a small historically black college. That is totally untrue. Ideas are ideas. Smart folks exist everywhere. But ultimately, culture is different. So you need to figure out how to insert yourself into the culture. The exact same thing with the tenure process. What's the culture of the institution that you're coming into? And then ultimately, having a degree from the University of Alabama and teaching at LSU, especially this time of the year, if you're a football fan, different culture. That took a minute to get my head around. First job out, like I said, was at LSU in 2005. I came in ABD, and so I had a 2-2 low, but they reduced, I taught 2 classes each semester, but they reduced it to 1 class my first semester. That was a hard thing to do. So I spent significant parts. Tuesday nights I was in Baton Rouge. I taught my class 4:40 to 7:30, and then I drove back to Tuscaloosa at least twice a week. So 4.5, 5-hour ride, because ultimately I had to be in a space where I could do my research. Now, truth be told, that's not the smart way to do it, but ultimately you have to be able to function in the space that you're in. And the last thing that you want is you don't want your senior colleagues or the administrators that you're working for to feel like you're so needy, you need so much extra attention. You need to show up ready to roll, and you need to prove to them that you're able to do that work. Once I got there, since I've been there since, I earned tenure in 2011. Okay, over the course of that time period, I've taught 11 different classes. 11 different classes has been a lot, but ultimately, once again, you need to be able to do the work the department needs you to be able to do. You have to find balance, but ultimately, now as an assistant director, when I talk to a junior faculty and all they can tell me is what they can't do, I get frustrated. So ultimately, you need to be able to balance. These are the expectations of the profession, these are the expectations of the department, and ultimately, what do I need? Over the time period, the program that I teach in is a higher education program, so it's exclusively graduate. I only work with master's students or doctoral students. Working with graduate students is interesting because they show up in your classes with experiences and understandings that oftentimes may be beyond whatever you were prepared to do. They bring great experiences into the classroom. Don't see it as competitive, see it as an opportunity to enhance your knowledge base. Over that time period, I've put it 22 doctoral students. Once again, assistant professors, to have that much of a doctoral advising load was very difficult. The only way that I was able to do it was ultimately, once again, if I'm working with smart students that are engaged, how can I figure out how our research interest and their research interests, our research interests together, translate into publications? Several of those students have gone on to secure positions in places that are interesting. So I've had my graduate students that have gone on to be professors in places like Virginia Tech, the University of Oklahoma, the University of Washington, the University of Texas. Once they're out there, there's an experience base that started in our classrooms that's translated to other places. So I'm having conversations with my colleague at the University of Washington about the experiences of indigenous populations or Native American students that are beyond, if I'm in the South and I'm talking about, so how do African American students experience schooling? My knowledge base is expanded by their knowledge base. Take advantage of it. Okay, as a researcher, currently I edit 2 journals, the College Student Affairs Journal and the Journal of Curriculum Theorizing. Published over 40 works, and I presented over 60 different papers at over 60 different conferences. You know how this works. The funding to attend conferences, it just doesn't exist. One of the ways that I've been able to make that work is we go as a group. Actually, I spent significant time at the American Educational Research Association with Walter Tillman. We've done some work together, and we spent some time at those conferences. If you have a group of folks that you travel with and that you study with and you write with, there's no reason why you can't pool the funds. It's a lot cheaper to get a suite somewhere than have to pay for it by yourself. But you can't afford not to participate with the national organization. Your benchmarks aren't just your colleagues in the department or even at the university. Ultimately, it's the broader disciplinary community that you're a part of. So be in relation to them. The way that you find those relationships is at conferences. The other thing that's really, really important when you first go to conferences, if you're at a place like San Francisco, if you're in San Diego or wherever, if you're or New York or Chicago, there are a lot of things that are much more interesting than attending the conferences at the conference, but at the end of the day, that's where you're working. I see it all the time. I've had my students that'll go to the conference, do their presentation, and then they're seeing the city the rest of the time. That's not how you do it. You should be spending evenings at meetings, at lunches, at dinners, whatever. Build relationships. That may be the only time that you get to network with colleagues across the country. Eventually, if you're going through the tenure process, you're going to need to secure external letters, and that may be the only time that you physically lay eyes on those people that will be writing those letters. Use the conferences as working vacations, okay? So you're thinking that, okay, I'll spend some time doing it. No. Spend as much time in the conference and with colleagues as you can. And lastly, as far as the service, your national organizations, connect with them in any way that you can. Provide those services, be it on editorial review teams, boards, even work in the regional, national, and international community. Do the work. Be a part of the national community. Okay, finally, because I want to stay on task with time, what I decided to do, there are a million different ways, there are a million different tidbits that we could share about how this process works, because no tenure process and none of the promotion processes at any university are the same. But what I wanted to do then, I wanted to figure out basically how I could pull together a really, really quick 10 points that I think would be helpful. So what I did is I pulled up what we'll refer to as the 10 Commandments of tenure. Okay, here we go, 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments. First of all, publish, 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 and publish more. You have to write. If you're in a tenure track position, especially if it's a research institution, you've got to write. You'll be called to put as much energy as you can into your teaching or into your advising. And there's something about, in my opinion, people that do the type of work that we do, when we're in front of our students, we try as hard to look as confident as we can. But ultimately, you can't provide the service to the students if you're only here for 3 or 4 years. You got to find a balance. So publish, publish, publish. Next, view tenure as a political process. Once again, it's always a business. It's not personal. When you're going through the tenure process, know what the policy statements are and follow the policies. It's not about it's not about your relationship with individuals that you're working with, because they're the people that you're working with. Know the policy, and remember, it's a political process. Find out the norms, and once again, there's the norms that are in your department, they're the norms that are your university-wide, but also they're the norms of the broader community. You're constantly benchmarking yourself against your colleagues within the boundaries of your university. You need to be able to say, just like as Dr. Kelly said, your CV needs to always be ready, and you never know. You need to have it prepared, and basically be prepared to be a part of a broader conversation. Document everything. From day one, even before I knew exactly what the categories were, the first thing I did is I got a large binder, and every time I did anything, if I guest lectured in somebody else's class, make a note of it, drop it in. If you get recognized for coming and speaking at the YMCA, whatever the situation is, document it, document it, document it, all of it. Rely on your record and not promises on protection. Rely on your record. I can say this because we're going through a lot of shifts. Administrators have expectations that often are driven by a student credit hour. Who can cover this class? And oftentimes we may make promises that ultimately by the end of the day may not shake out. But if you know what the policy statements are and you've done your work and you've documented it, that's not negotiable. Know exactly what the statements are and follow them. It's not the promises. Reinforce your research and teaching with service. Let me highlight here that you notice that I'm at point 6 before I'm talking about teaching and service. That should tell you something. I'm not suggesting that you don't invest your energy in your teaching, because that's extremely important, but ultimately what the teaching does is, I've never heard of anybody saying, I really didn't follow the policy statement, but I was such an excellent teacher that they actually gave me tenure on my teaching. That's not how it works. But I tell you how the teaching will work. That maybe you may have a questionable record, and then they'll say, well, the public, they're kind of here. What's the teaching look like? And then they have bad teaching evaluations. You're sunk. Do the service to build the relationships. Produce the research that you need to do, and be as competent and as thoughtful in your teaching as you can. Don't run your department until after tenure. What more can you say? Understand the responsibilities, the institutional culture, and let the folks that are charged with doing that work do that work. Don't feel like you have to be a part of it until you're asked. And then next, be a good department citizen. Know how to work with folks. Manage your own professional image, and I think we just talked about it. Social media can be rough. it can be terrible. Be thoughtful in how you manage yourself, particularly in your relationships with your students, especially if you work with undergraduate students. It's a lot of gray area. Make sure that you manage that image. And lastly, develop a marketable record. Know who the people that you're being benchmarked are against, be in relation to them, but also understand that you have an image that you're managing yourself. I'll stop right here. Thank you once again, Dr. Brown, and take care.